Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Zateo's weekly Ask the Editor. It is November 24th, 11 a.m. Eastern, and today we are talking Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation, Zoran and Trump's queen off in the Oval Office, Trump inching towards invading Venezuela, his insane threats towards Democratic lawmakers, and the subsequent Republican response to those lawmakers telling service members not to comply with illegal orders. And, of course, dear viewer, your questions. We're sad to be missing Mehdi today, but I'm thrilled to be joined by the best in the business, the ace of coverage on what's going on in inside Trump world, Swinner the winner, Swin Soup saying, folks, give it up. I'm hearing your claps from home. That's how loud they are. Swin, how you
I'm
doing,
staring
baby?
blankly at my laptop camera right now because I'm thinking to myself, never call me Swinner ever again.
Swinner the winner. It's a good rhyme.
You're
It
entire
never.
no. Maybe I'll forgive it for this one. Especially because I'm also preoccupied with the fact that, unfortunately, for this Ask the Editor, we have no editor. This is complete anarchy. I don't have a Zateo hoodie on right now. This chat is missing Mehdi's incredible mellifluous voice and accent. Our Zateo subscribers and viewers will have to settle for two correspondents, Prem and Swin. So let's make of it what we will.
Yeah, we will. We will. But how you doing? How you feeling? How's your weekend been?
I've never felt better in my life. My two terrorist toddler children boys are still riding every day. One of them is at school or whatever they're calling it right now. The other one is somewhere upstairs. I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to sprint into the camera.
Sure, one of those.
I'm sure our viewers would love it. He's the
Yeah,
cutest damn thing in the world, but maybe next time.
yeah.
We have too much to get to.
Indeed, indeed. So let's start with the Zoran and Trump meeting. As many of you saw just last week, Zohran Mamdani, a 34-year-old Queensman, went to visit Donald Trump, a 79-year-old Queensman, and we saw what happened. How did you react to the meeting, Swin? And what do you make of it?
Well, headed into it, I was pinging around to my sources in Trump world, working within the administration in the White House, elsewhere in the Donald Trump orbit, trying to get a read of, okay, in the hours leading up to it, what is this going to be like? Do you think it's going to be like a replay of the Zelensky-Vance-Trump Oval Office meeting? Or do you think it's going to be something else? Because sometimes Donald Trump, when he's trying to people please, or when he's trying to use an impolite word, star fuck, things can be a little bit different than you might expect, even if he has diametrically opposed political views with the person he's trying to supposedly charm or suck up to or whatever. So I really wasn't sure. And the people in the White House and elsewhere who I was talking to were being similarly coy about it. They were like, well, I mean, some put it at 50-50 odds. Either it's going to be a total shit show, it's going to explode, or it's going to be, the president likes to throw curveballs sometimes, especially when the cameras are on. You don't know what you're going to expect. So I kind of felt in my heart it was definitely going to be the latter category, especially based on the way people close to Donald Trump were talking about it in the 6 hours or so leading up to the meeting. And lo and behold, as we all saw on TV, that's what it was, including in their private meeting where the cameras were not there for. By all accounts, including Zoran Mamdani's and Donald Trump's, they seem to all have also a very pleasant, very placid off-camera meeting as well. And the thing that struck me, I'm sure struck a lot of our viewers who saw it perhaps the most, was when Zoran was asked point blank, okay, you guys are being chummy sort of right now. Do you still think that this guy is a fascist?
Yeah.
And Donald Trump just cuts him off and says, it's okay. You can say it's easier this way. He's smiling. He's laughing about it. So Zoran Mamdani says, yes, he stands by what he said before. He's going to continue to say that he believes Donald Trump is ideologically and practically a fascist. So my first takeaway from that is that the reason Donald Trump was smiling and giggling about it while he was going about encouraging Zoran to be to just say it is not because Donald Trump is a good sport about anything ever or has a real or genuine sense of humor. It's largely because Donald Trump is of the mind that when you are running a campaign or when you're operating in office. You were saying a bunch of things about your political opponents that is just kayfabe, that is just cynical slop for the rubes and the masses, or however he thinks about his supporters. Certainly he thinks a lot of them are that, unfortunately. And there's no way you could actually believe it. It's a game. So who cares if you say it in front of me? You might as well be saying I'm like a space alien. It doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt my feelings in this particular context. Whereas Zohran Mamdani, whatever else other people, including his critics, might say of him, I don't think many of them would allege that the mayor-elect doesn't actually believe it. But in Donald Trump's hyper-cynical, hyper-authoritarian mindset, he cannot conceive of a universe where someone is saying something like that where they would actually believe it. So in that brief moment, it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition, not just of men and styles and politics and ideology, but also of fundamental beliefs. And whereas one kind of looked at least in that very narrow sense, he was rejecting a form of tired, hyper-politicized cynicism, while the other one was bathing in it in a form of theater. And as kind of, fucking funny as the moment was, that gave me an equal feeling of disgust towards the man we all elected as the sitting leader of the free world. Nominal of the free world, of course.
Right. Yeah. I think you put that so well. And one thing that I was thinking about, also before I go on, just a reminder, folks on Substack, YouTube, please make sure any thoughts, questions, send them all. We'll try to get to as much as we can. But Swin, to what you're getting at of how Trump views these things, I think in the aftermath of that meeting, it was so tempting to, as much as one can, try to psychoanalyze Trump or figure out does he just have a crush on Zoran? Does he just love a winner? Does he love a celebrity? Is he maybe gaining some favor out of this by sort of renormalizing himself after a week of terrible headlines surrounding covering up the Epstein files, surrounding his threats to execute Democratic lawmakers, which we'll get into? Is it him trying to wheel and deal to get some favors with Trump Tower constructions and to, get less sort of building checks from regulators and so on? It could be anything. It could be a secret fourth thing. I think, given how Trump has gotten so much success from the exact thing you're talking about, which is looking at things in the most cynical way possible and just kind of weaponizing them and utilizing them to his own needs, I think his opposition and the capital L left should also maybe consider viewing this meeting in that respect too, which is to say, regardless of Trump's psyche as to why he behaved the way he did, what the left got was a complete dub, was a complete normalization of Zoran Mamdani on the national stage, was a normalization of socialism, given that Zoran Mamdani didn't back down on any of his stances or policy ideas in that meeting. He didn't water himself down an inch. And all that really happened was a bunch of Republican ad makers have to go back to the drawing board because now they can't really say, I mean, even before it wasn't that credible before, but now it's kind of hard to do a 2026 ad where everything is dark. Zoran Mamdani's skin is dark and his beard is more full, and it's Zoran Mamdani is coming to a town near you. Like Abigail Spanberger loves Zoran Mamdani because Donald Trump said explicitly, I'd happily live in Zoran's New York City. And so I think it's very tempting and understandable for us to try to understand Trump's psyche. But it's 10 years into this. All that really matters is Trump is still as villainous as he always has been, and presumably he wants to get something out of it. Because as you're saying, he sees everything as kayfabe, he sees everything as cynical, he sees everything, every person, even in his own administration, as kind of just objects. Even people who he seems to be empowering, including Stephen Miller, he also sees Stephen Miller with some level of disdain. And
yeah,
so
he's a little weird, kind of a dork.
Yeah.
Which,
and so if he can be that successful, exactly. So if he can be that successful, being that sort of cynical, the left should at least be able to look at this moment and just kind of take the dub, metastasize it into their sort of political strategy, and then move on. Because ultimately, as we're going to talk about, there's 1,000,001 other news cycles that we need to get to.
Right. And before we move on, I just want to put a button on what you said. What you were saying, I think, is true, but only for this little sliver in time. There was only a matter of days, weeks, maybe months, maybe seconds or milliseconds even before Donald Trump sees something on TV that Mayor-elect Mamdani did or said, maybe once he's mayor, gets mad about it, runs to Truth Social to say, oh, he was so nice to me. He begged for an Oval Office meeting. And now the moment he turns his back, he's all like anti-Trump this, anti-Trump that, or just doing something I don't like. Should I send the troops to lower Manhattan today? Like,
Right.
it's only a matter of time before, like, this is not a relationship or
Totally.
chumminess built to last in any respect. But if you talk to a bunch of um, New Yorkers who are emotionally invested in this and watching this, a lot of them will say, even ones who may not have initially really supported Zoran, that he is buying the city time. And that is a way better premise for them than if Trump began the hyper bloodlusting federal crackdown in a multitude of ways, like the moment he was sworn into office.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that all that is another reason why we should just take the dub. Because things might very well change even in a day, as we've seen with Trump. He's, beyond thermostatic when it comes to these kinds of things. Typical Canadian, just while we're on the topic, Typical Canadian on YouTube asks whether you think they will stay in touch, indeed, and if you think that will continue to help in sort of keeping ICE out of New York City, Swin. What do you think?
Yes, I think the Mamdani administration and the Trump administration will indeed remain in touch, kind of because you have to. Like, even if you think he is a fascist, like the boat sailed on like, are we normalizing fascism at this point? It's normal. It is currently shrouded and engulfed an entire U.S. political party that is one of the only two parties in town. Like, that ship has long since sailed.
Yeah.
They have a trifecta in official Washington. He controls the White House. New York City, whether we like it or not, relies on working with the federal government on a whole lot of things. You have to work with the Trump administration, not necessarily enabling them, especially when it comes to their rapaciously violent and brutal deportation and ethnic cleansing regime. You don't have to give them credit where no credit is due, and you don't have to do or say anything you necessarily don't believe. But if you're a city that needs federal dollars, whether there's a Republican or Democratic administration in power in official Washington, like, you have to communicate with the White House. There's just there isn't really a way around that unless you want to go straight to the relationship that Donald Trump has with Governor Pritzker in Illinois and Mayor Johnson in Chicago, which is just not a great starting point if you are at least trying to relieve your city preemptively from some really horrific pain from the jump of the start of your tenure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a very much related arena of Trump's lawlessness, which of course is the increasing amount of Caribbean strikes that are happening. There was great reporting recently from the Post about how exactly the Trump administration has been really flying against the law to make this happen, putting a lot of military lawyers, military officials kind of questioning whether any of what this is, obviously, is compliant with military law, which is already a pretty loose and fluid category if we look at American military history. But what has been your sense of how the administration has been dealing with these questions of legality with regards to these strikes in the Caribbean? And if that scruple or if that questioning has slowed this down at all, this lurch towards potentially invading Venezuela?
Well, with regards to the strikes, first off, that makes me think of two things initially. Number one is, remember that famous quote that President Lyndon Johnson had about how when he was sort of knew of the details of what the Kennedy brothers were doing in Latin America, and he referred to it as, I may be botching the quote a little bit, but like a goddamn murder incorporated that the federal government was essentially running. So this is that. Trump and his cronies and Marco Rubio are essentially running a Murder Inc. in the Caribbean, but a much more vulgar and explicit and out and loud version of it than what Lyndon Johnson was quietly and privately condemning, sort of, in his time. It also reminds me of when we were getting ready for Trump 2.0 to come to power. And during the Biden to Trump presidential transition, I was talking back when I was working at Rolling Stone magazine to a bunch of different people who were very deep within the weeds involved of planning the federal onslaught in a variety of departments and agencies that we're now suffocating with now. And as I was trying to get as much detail about the coming blitzes as I could, I asked one of them, a conservative lawyer who was deeply involved with what has come to fruition in a lot of ways now. Okay, heading into Trump's second term, what is the standard operating legal principle of this new administration? I have no idea if what I was thinking at the time was, well, I wonder if this person is going to quote Voltaire to me or something, or Judge Judy. I have no idea.
Sure.
But the response was very simply, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but also very seriously, what are you going to do about it? That is the legal principle of Trump's second term in terms of understanding the level of raw power and the amount of time it will take the court system and the opposition to catch up to you while you are doing so much of this lawlessness in a variety of different ways. Yes, they'll slow some things down, but if you just throw so much of it at the board and flood the zone with shit, at the end of the day, the federal government and the president of the United States can kind of look at the opposition, look at Congress, and to some extent look at the courts and just say, what are you going to do about it? They control the Pentagon, they control the White House, they control the Department of Justice, they control a very pliant Congress. This is dominated, of course, by Trumpist Republicans right now. So when it comes to the Murder Incorporated that they're running in the Caribbean, and the potential for other operations, or even perhaps bombing of actual Venezuelan soil, I'm not putting anything beyond these guys. And I can get more into that if you would like a little bit later. But before I do, I really want to get your thoughts on this because I have monologued for far too long right now. It pisses me off, as I'm sure it really fucking pisses you off. It's a great way to start a Monday morning.
Yeah, completely. There's your morning cup of coffee here. What you're getting at towards the end there, I think, is such a deep frustration for so many of our viewers, which is the idea that this administration, especially this term, has been so successful at, as you say, flooding the zone with shit, such that it is such a reasonable position for an allied lawyer to say, yeah, what are you going to do about it? And that frustration obviously comes from the idea that, well, why can't Democrats do the same thing when they're in power? And that base frustration I agree with. I think it's totally correct that Democrats are, in fact, so much more conservative when it comes to governance than Republicans are, who are much more liberal in terms of what they choose to care about when it comes to the bureaucracy.
Right.
But there is also this sort of like fundamental asymmetry with regards to the ease at which Democratic projects can be pursued when they're in power versus Republican ones, because much of the surrounding apparatus in Washington is default more interested in the conservative-leaning projects when it comes to immiserating the welfare state, when it comes to destroying federal agencies, and when it comes to pursuing war. Those things are all things that, like, the broader machinery in DC is okay to let happen in a way that, like, the things that, like, a very progressive trifecta might want to flood the zone with, those barriers that might come up, not just the courts, but elsewhere, outside, are much more quick to happen. There's much more organized,
look at what happened
wealthy
with
opposition.
Debt forgiveness.
Exactly. And so, I don't know. I always get frustrated because I think everyone who's frustrated with the idea that the Democrats don't do as much as Republicans to get stuff done, that frustration is correct. But then there's this more like atmospheric asymmetry that we have to contend with and deal with. That, I mean, for what it's worth, if Democrats themselves, swung against that broader atmosphere much more explicitly, I think that would be meaningful too.
Right. And but before we move on from that, I just want to put a quick note on that because I think it was so salient in these discussions. There is, of course, we understand that frustration, but my fear, not just as a journalist, but as just as a person, just as a voter, just as a citizen, is that, look, we saw what happened when Obama, who ran in 2008 as a reformer and against the George W. Bush war on terror, came into office. He and his people spent roughly 8 years codifying some of those abuses, a lot of the machinery of the global war on terror, and just basically taking it over and putting a new, softer, gentler hood ornament on it in a lot of ways. So I think you're absolutely right that one possible horrifying legacy of Trumpism, and particularly the second Trump presidency, is that, the next Democratic president is probably going to have to make a lot of tough choices of how much they want to unwind what he's done, because it's not going to be easy if you want to undo a lot of it. I'm not sure if undoing a lot of it is possible. And then you're going to have some minds who could conceivably become the next Democratic president of the United States who say to themselves, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I'm going to do American authoritarianism in the modern age, but for my policies and my agenda. And even if those are policies that you and I might fundamentally, or at least on paper, agree with more than the horrific, figurative, and sometimes literal bloodbath that Donald Trump and the Republican Party are doing, I don't like that. I don't like when the war on terror was given a new, kinder, gentler philosopher king in the form of Barack Obama. I do not like what this form of American Democrat backsliding is going to look like if the next kinder, gentler, liberal president just says, well, I'm just going to do my own version from that. I mean, in the long term, no good is going to come from that.
Yeah, no, it seems like if there is going to be an executive that comes into power that does take a very strong fist towards things, it has to be towards completely dismantling them and not reappropriating them into, as you say, a gentler face that largely just does things.
But every
equally
Democrat
bad, but quieter.
you can think of is not going to do that. They're going to choose
yeah.
the evil option or something closer to it.
Yeah, no, I know. It's hard to think of that many people in the pool right now that might do what we're hoping for. Before we move on, just to address some questions, I know many people are wondering exactly where Mehdi is. He's dealing with some family stuff right now, so he's not available, but he will be back soon, rest assured. So don't you worry, he'll be back very soon. We're all missing him. And also,
love
just
you, Mehdi.
Yes, we do. And just a reminder as well, I know some of you folks are tuning in maybe for the first time. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you as well for subscribing. You can subscribe to us at Zateo.com. And for those of you that are joining us on YouTube, you can get more from Zateo, including a lot of Swin's amazing reporting on what he's talking about here with regards to the inner workings of the Trump administration. You can get that at Zateo.com as well.
You can get Prem Thackers as well. Don't sell yourself short.
That's right. That's right. Ev Katz on Substack asks, what are the motives for military attacks on Venezuela? Which I'm glad you asked, Ev, because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Do you, Swin, see it, based on your conversations and what you've been able to glean from the administration, do you see it as a distraction attempt? Ev says they don't need Venezuelan oil, as many say. Ev also says it's true that many folks in Venezuela are more worried about food insecurity and are not fully tuned into the outside threat, according to Ev's friends in Venezuela. How do you think of the Trump administration's approach to Venezuela?
They're serious about it. I mean, look, like for Trump himself, as lizard-brained and incurious and petty and childish that he is, this isn't the whole pie, but certainly a piece of it is that for him, this is to some degree a grudge match. He was very bitter about this in 2017, went before the cameras when he was president the first time, and dangled the possibility of troops. I've not ruled out invading Venezuela. That obviously didn't happen. The Trump administration the first time around, which include characters like John Bolton at the time, did support Trump in his initial desire to overthrow, or at least try to force the overthrow of Maduro. But Trump quickly got bored with it and moved on and started hating people like John Bolton a lot more than he did Nicolas Maduro. This time around, that is not the case at the moment. Like, if you talk to people at a very senior level in the Trump administration, in the Trump White House, you genuinely get the sense that this is not a bluff. This is not him doing madman theory or art of the deal, trying to get Nicolas Maduro to blink and flee the country, thinking, oh, what if he actually does bomb us? Oh, what if Trump does actually bomb Caracas? No, he is at a point where he is very open to the idea, even if he hasn't pulled the trigger, so to speak, yet. And he is surrounded by top officials and lieutenants, including Stephen Miller and Marco Rubio, who think that regime change in Venezuela is good policy and that they wouldn't mind doing a few bombs, at least here or there, CIA-backed covert operations, more bombings in the Caribbean, just to try to destabilize things, to try to get Maduro to run away, or to try to get elements in the Venezuelan military or elite to do American dirty work for them. And if that doesn't work, at least at this point in time, Trump has privately said that he would be willing to push harder because he doesn't see how a breaking point couldn't be that much farther away from where we are now. So a lot can change. Maybe he strikes, maybe he doesn't bomb. But at this point, I really wouldn't bet against it because the sense of the conversations I've been having in recent weeks remind me a lot of the conversations I was having with people in the government during the weeks in the run-up to Trump bombing Iran. So we'll see what happens. But the vibes are not good. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. How do you think this? I mean, it's been a ceaseless debate ever since he got on the stage, the idea that Trump was anti-war or idiosyncratic when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. And at some points, obviously, he has been idiosyncratic or at least unexpected or divergent in U.S. foreign policy for sure. I don't want to negate that either. But how do you think this complicates or maybe enhances our understanding of Trump's ideological basis as some people seeing him as not being a neocon before and now being a neocon now? Is it ultimately what actually is happening is that it wasn't ever anti or pro neocon? It was just whatever he felt was of his own self or collective self-interest. And at certain points, that looks maybe kind of like neoconservatism. At some points, that seems less hawkish. But it never is about that question. It's about his own interest. Like, how do you sort of square that?
That's certainly a key component of it. And what I'm about to say, I'm cribbing a little bit from sources who I've spoken to in and close to the administration, some of whom get frustrated about this because whether we love or loathe what they have to say or what the policies they espouse, there are obviously always people for Trump who work for Trump who actually believe things.
Right.
So a characterization I have gravitated to that others, including within the Trump orbit, have held for years, is that he is a lazy and cowardly warmonger. That's what he is. He is a warmonger, despite his talks and lies of not liking the neocon and less wars or whatever. He is a lazy, incompetent, cowardly warmonger. Mm-hmm. He likes war. What he did to Iran earlier this year, the bombing, that was an act of war. That was warfare. What he is doing now to Venezuela is threatening further war of an already existing war. He has been threatening to invade Mexico. Look at what he's done in Yemen. Look at what he's done with ramping back up drone strikes in different parts of the world. Look at what he did during his first term. He had the chance to end the war in Afghanistan, which he repeatedly and routinely campaigned on. He didn't do it. He left that mess for President Biden to actually do. We could go on and on and on and on, but if you look at so much of the globe, so many countries, excuse me on that, he's a warmonger, but he is not particularly ideological, and he's rather lazy about it. So that's why you get the outcome that you do, whereas we don't have troops on the ground in Tehran right now because he's lazy, not because he doesn't like killing people overseas. Or in some respects at home, to be perfectly honest.
There's another realm in which Trump's perhaps lack of actual ideological commitments has been made clear, or at least political commitments, and that's, of course, his treatment of Marjorie Taylor Greene. In recent days, or last week, I should say, Donald Trump unendorsed Marjorie Taylor Greene amid her commitment to releasing the Epstein files in full, amongst other disagreements that the pair have had, beyond the fact that, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of the biggest allies of Trump ever since she emerged on the political landscape. Days after that endorsement, Marjorie Taylor Greene has announced that she's resigning from Congress effective January 5th, the eve of January 6th. Dakota Caller 5257 on YouTube asks if we think Marjorie Taylor Greene is running for president. So, Swin, firstly, what was your reaction generally to the rift and her subsequent resignation? And then maybe secondarily, where do we think she might be going?
I hate to zoom out too
Go ahead.
much with these in terms of the scope of history. That might be annoying our viewers right now, but it did remind me of when the breakup with MTG and Trump initially happened. Robert Service, who I think might be a Tory author and biographer, he's written lengthy biographies, whether you like them or don't like them, of Stalin and Trotsky and people like that. And his thesis on Trotsky, whether you agree with it or not, I enjoyed reading his book, but I disagreed with the premises of a lot of it. But having said that, his thing about Trotsky is his figure as a beloved hero of certain parts of the left and the socialist left, is that if you actually look at what his policies were during that point of the USSR's history, there was a staggeringly narrow set of disagreements and deal breakers between him and Stalin. And that if Trotsky had become head of the Soviet Union instead of Stalin, probably a comparable amount of people would have died. Like, if you actually look at his prescriptions on like the use of state violence, between him and Stalin, there was a much more narrow terrain of disagreement and ideological divide than a lot of people would like to admit. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, but it certainly is a true statement when you look at when Trump breaks up from any of these Republicans or MAGA conservatives who used to be, until 8.5 seconds ago, like his best buddy, wanted to be his best man or best woman at his wedding, singing at his wedding, thought the sun, the moon, and the stars all belonged to God Emperor Donald Trump. And now all of a sudden, there's this rift that is driven in, at least in claims, by a certain degree of politics and ideology, and also, largely speaking, of course, by personal animus, hurt feelings, grudges, things like that. So that is something I think of constantly when we're talking about the Marjorie Taylor Greene of it all, and her wanting to move on from Trumpism. It's not something where you can just turn the page in a matter of days, like she's saying right now. Like, you two are still far closer ideologically on the far right spectrum than you are apart. And while I am not the world's biggest fan of Jasmine Crockett, whatever, she's an elected representative who's there. She did hit the nail on the head and say exactly what I was thinking when she said on the Sunday shows, when asked about Marjorie Taylor Greene, she and Marjorie Taylor Greene have tiffed on Capitol Hill before, that you were in his crosshairs for what, like 5 seconds, a few days, a week, and you're resigning? You're leaving your job? You keep talking over and over and over again about how you love serving the people of Georgia. And this is where you're like taking your ball and going home, or like packing up and saying, oh, he's being too mean to me. That really is, in my opinion, if you're trying to inject politics into the messaging of this, I think that's the perfect way to message it, because it's just so, it's like, this has been happening to everybody who has crossed Trump for years, if not the past decade, and you've been cheering it on, and all of a sudden it happens to you for 8 seconds, and it kind of is the perfect microcosm of the stereotype of the conservative mainstream's lack of empathy, where it's like, oh, just because it happened to you, just because you got a pinprick version of it, suddenly you're throwing up your hands and saying, well, this is too fucking much. Did that answer the question? If it didn't, I'll leave it up to you to answer the question.
No. I think that was pretty. That last point, I agree with that. I thought Crockett did put it quite well, and that does make me think. So this actually dovetails well with a few questions we have. Don Morrison asks whether on Substack. Don Morrison asks whether there will be more Republicans resigning midterm, and Abby O, similarly on Substack, asks whether Marjorie Taylor Greene quitting, will that make other Republicans less likely to go against Trump? Or are his approval numbers just too toxic for people not to try to make some distance? So, in other words, to sort of synthesize that, what do you think the Republican House member, especially, their calculus is as Trump's approval rating continues to go down? And as Trump kind of continues to just do whatever he wants despite that, regardless of whether, you are an outsider Republican like Marjorie Taylor Greene, or maybe a sort of like insider like Mike Johnson, or someone sort of outsider in your own respect as a Don Bacon. Like, how do you sort of navigate that as a House Republican?
I'm actually, excuse me, I'm actually going to double back to the other question because I realize I didn't answer what you said earlier. I'm going to try to not talk about so much Soviet history right now and actually just talk a little bit faster because I know we're short on time and I want to get to as many questions as possible. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, is she running for president? She has told people privately about her presidential ambitions. If she runs in 2028 or if she doesn't, I wouldn't really be surprised either way. But her strenuous denials about the reporting and the chatter that she has talked to allies privately about presidential ambitions, I'll put it this way, I'll put it politely. I am extremely confident that her recent statements on that and tweets are suspect. So take that for what you will. Do I think that she'll necessarily try to challenge, like, say, J.D. Vance or whoever is the nominee or nominee in waiting in a couple of years? I don't know. We'll see how much media attention or whatever that she wants to get out of it. And with regards to where do I think this puts everybody else? I think she is a very unique case because of her own personal ambitions and how she has, in one way or another, in recent months. You can tell based on talking to people who have communicated with her regularly, she does think that she has what it takes to be president one day if she does end up trying to mount a campaign. Good luck. Good luck to you if that's what you as Marjorie Taylor Greene actually thinks about where the pulse of the median voter is today. But with regards of, like, will more Republicans start breaking with Trump just because his approval rating keeps zigging in and out of the very low 40s and high 30s, which is danger zone territory for any incumbent, even if you are a lame duck. People like Don Bacon are a completely different, like, tiny sliver of a minority stratosphere. Yeah. But when it comes to Trump's ironclad grip on the conservative base, the conservative movement, the Republican Party, including Capitol Hill, and the fact that crossing him in a way that pisses him off too much, like MTG has, comes with the implicit, if not explicit, first-order consequence of just a hysterical flood of death threats, at least some of them probably very credible. There is going to be a lot of staying in line and keeping in line with Donald Trump, even if his unpopularity continues to rise and popularity continues to sink. And it is because the federal government is not really a federal government as you and I know it, as we've been raised to believe it should be in a free and fair society. What it is a sprawling personality cult fronted by a authoritarian former game show host who is using that personality cult essentially as the means of a federal apparatus and disguising it as legitimate federal government. So because we live in that really awful, pathetic American reality and moment right now, no, there's so much of the Republican elite, even if they want to, cannot really meaningfully distance from this guy, because if they want to win in a primary and if they want to run in an election in the near future, even if Trump is an albatross or a liability hanging around their neck, it is more of a liability for them if they don't bear hug him, both in terms of personal safety and electoral success, potentially even in a conservative primary. You have to tie yourself to this elderly white man incumbent president who is deeply unpopular, who is overseeing a malaise-filled U.S. economy. If you're J.D. Vance wanting to be a vice president to become the next president of the United States, does that remind you of another vice president who you once campaigned against roughly a year ago? And what happened to her presidential ambitions? But anyway, that's a different subject.
Right. I mean, that you put that so well. It does remind me of how often there is this broadside against the left when there's these crowded primaries, and there's this fear that comes from the sort of center-left space that, well, if we pick the most leftward candidate, like, we're going to be held hostage to when they end up losing in the general election, which, there's no actual statistical evidence to show that to be a readily deployable claim as much as they do deploy it. But the Republicans are actually in that scenario where they as you say, whether by like sort of existential reasons, safety reasons, or just political primary reasons, are wedded to remaining Trumpian, remaining Trump's ally. And based on, if nothing else, just the generic ballot polling, which again, I'm no sort of reverent person towards polling, but if you take it with any sort of even half truth, the polling right now for the generic ballot is the worst it's been since like early 2017 in terms of, I think last week the generic ballot for the House was 40, like plus 14 for Democrats. That's crazy. That's like an insane number. Given a year ago, it was pretty much 50-50.
It's
And
even
so the bind
wilder.
that the Republicans are in to, as you say, just remain tied to this guy who is looking more and more every day like an electoral loser, if nothing else. It's crazy how much that is actually the case of what the centrists and like conservative Democrats say happens when like a left-leaning person wins a primary.
Right, and we'll see what happens in about a year and then 3 years from now. But to your point, the polling looks even crazier when you realize that those exact same polls are not shy about the numbers telling the story about how much people hate the Democratic Party right now,
Yeah,
including rank and file mom and pop Democratic voters. They just despise the Democrats right now. There is a quote unquote brand problem, if we want to use a clinical, annoying pollster term that the Democratic Party has right now. They are completely in the wilderness. And why shouldn't they be, given everything that they've allowed to happen, at least partially on their watch? But the fact that so much of the electorate is right now willing to say, at least in the current polls, like I said, we'll see what happens in a year, that even as much as I hate them, I extremely hate and despise the Republican Party, particularly under Donald Trump, extremely more, to the point where I'm willing to pull the lever for a Democrat and not just sit home. That is a phenomenal indictment of, well, both parties in a way, but particularly the ruling party.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens in a year. Who knows? A year is a long time away.
It is. As we've seen, even days are a long time.
Do we have time for a few more questions? I don't want to shortchange people.
I know. I think we're running on time. We'll take one more question. Thanks, folks, everyone, for sending all your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of it. We didn't even get to all the topics we wanted to talk about today. That's how much news is happening. I think V for Violet on Substack actually gives us a good question here that I think, Swin, you can put your political consultant hat on for. Who would ever want to elect someone, in reference to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who ran away the moment things got tough for her?
That is an excellent question. I mean, I guess it depends how much she or others like her would be able to spin what happened. Like, she is obviously not spinning it as a moment of cowardice. Quite the opposite. She's saying, I'm standing up to the bully. I need to do it outside of the confines of Congress because I'm not going to be productive here. It's like, well, by the time you're leaving or scheduled to leave, the midterms are still going to be roughly a year away. If you really did care earnestly about the people of your district and public service, there's still a good number of months of good and public service and constituent services that you could potentially do instead of making the media rounds and fluffing up your own profile. So, look, I think the past decade has sort of inoculated us to the terrifying idea of how much voters are willing to enjoy or at least look past when it comes to someone who is transparently a phony and transparently a con man or a con woman or a self-interested bloviator. Having said that, I'm not entirely sold that her act is going to be something that the median voter doesn't immediately see through. What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking about this as well, because on one hand, you see this, formulation of some sort of interesting, at least kind of like MAGA adjacent, MAGA somewhat rejecting, sort of America First version fusion that is trying to distinguish itself from old MAGA. These are people that say MAGA is dead, that we're sort of the new. I think they're still trying to figure out an acronym. I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene and a few others tweeting different things. Make America blank again. I forget the exact phrasings, but the acronym wasn't quite there yet. I think they're still workshopping it.
That's not That's the fetch that they are not going to be able to make happen.
Yes, I think that's true. And like on paper, you could like conceivably imagine it having some sort of like maybe cross-partisan appeal. But then you look at the polls, and at least like for Marjorie Taylor Greene as an individual, which, it's an unfair metric because there's been so much attention on her, because it's still very raw in terms of all the sort of negative feelings there might be towards her. But like obviously, much of the Democratic Party does not have strong feelings towards her. Despite the few places she might disagree with Trump, she has a very, very, very checkered past in other regards, to say the least. Republican voters, obviously, after Trump speaks out against her, the polls shift massively against her too. And independents are also net negative on her. And so, if she is meant to be sort of the icon of this new potential movement, I think there's just going to be growing pains that until Trump is fully out of the picture, if he indeed is out of the picture come 2028, which again, we will see. But if he is, I do think it is not clear who becomes his heir, because I think to inherit Trumpism, and MAGA in Trump's form without Trump, like that is not a thing. There is not a natural heir to him. JD Vance is very far from that. And some of that is because of who Trump is, how Trump behaves, but also because of the sort of like calcified way the media views Trump relative to other Republicans. And I think even though the media gives Republicans generally a lot of passes, I think the way that they have given Trump a pass specifically over the past 10 years has ossified in a way that is different than how the media and the atmosphere of politics in America treats other Republicans. So I think because of that, what Marjorie Taylor Greene ism and the success of that looks like, I think, is unclear to me until Trump is fully out of the picture. And then when the ball is just up in the air, maybe she picks it up, and some of those polls, as we've seen, they are kind of fluid in a way. Maybe they just totally shift because the memory of Trump being against her is gone. Or maybe he gives her his blessing on his way out. I'm not sure. As you say, it's years away. A lot can happen in years. A lot can happen in months. A lot can happen in days. Swin, if you have a final thought before we close out, I don't want to cut you off here.
I think a way that Vance or MTG or any of these pretenders to the throne could inherit easily Donald Trump's cult of personality and unique, once in a generation level of, whether you hate him or despise him, political charisma, is to get a time machine, go back in time to when the TV show Friends on NBC went off the air, and host the popular reality TV show that NBC hyper promoted as a replacement to Friends. Because the long ripple effect of history, I'm doing my long sweep of history thing again to end things here, of the Friends cast and crew deciding not to do another season or two, is the eventual political rise of Donald Trump style fascism in America. Because the way The Apprentice was put on by NBC and hyper promoted because they needed a Friends TV replacement, and sort of puffed up Donald Trump into the American consciousness and popular culture as this hyper competent, hyper successful, super cool businessman. I would be willing to place a heavy cosmic bet that he would not be president of the United States today if that decision among the Friends cast and crew did not occur at NBC. Now, if Marjorie Taylor Greene can go back in time and earn that mantle on NBC primetime, I think she has a good shot of inheriting the exact same MAGA cult of personality. Otherwise, I just don't see it. She does not have the same once-in-a-lifetime reality TV style charisma that President Donald J. Trump managed to accidentally get.
You're closing us off with the nightmarish consequences of the butterfly effect. We'll have to leave it there, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you again for joining us, for all your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of it. But thank you also for your support in helping me and Swin do this reporting to be able to get this insight that we can deliver to you. Thanks to your support, we can do all this reporting and so much more. We have so much more ahead into the close of this year and into the new year. But until then, for now, we just want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, a happy time with your friends, your family, whatever that might look like for you. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Once again, please continue to support us. Tell your friends, your family over Thanksgiving about this great new media outlet that you're engaging with. The lamestream media is only getting lamer. It's only getting more and more criminal. In the meantime, we can fill in the gaps for you guys. So please, spread the word as much as you can. This is a great holiday gift. We'll be getting some more of these in stock, and maybe some more deals ahead as well. So definitely stock up on your stocking stuffing Zateo gear. Swin, anything more to say?
I swear to our listeners and viewers, Mehdi Hassan will be back soon. I
He'll
know
be
you guys
back.
love Prem and Mehdi and tolerate me. Don't worry,
No, no, no.
he'll be back soon. Stay tuned.
Well, thanks, guys. Take care, be well, and see you soon. Thank you.